Opinions aren't facts. Feelings aren't facts. Just because it's a fact you don't like doesn't make it fake. Real journalists are not your enemy, but misinformation is. So start with the facts first. Now, I know that's a lot of information coming at you all at once, but all of those things are critical for you to carry with you every single day, especially in this modern era when we talk about the media and the role it plays in our democracy. Now, I'm sure some of you are already starting to squirm in your seats, wondering, what side of the aisle is this journalist on? So you can decide whether what I have to say is worth your time. Wow. What I am about to tell you has nothing to do with politics, so you can all just relax. My name is Lisa Remillard. I've been a professional journalist for 21 years. Most of that time I spent on TV reporting local news, and then I made the transition in 2018 to start reporting the news independently on social media. Now, being in the news business for more than 20 years has really given me a front row seat to not only see, but to be part of the media evolution. I've watched it shape our democracy. And I'm sure you feel it right now, too. Polarization in this country has gotten so bad, we have gotten so entrenched in our sides, that at this point, it's very difficult for us to even have an honest conversation with each other about the basic facts. It should be a red flag when someone starts to scream, "Fake news," simply because it's information including facts that they don't like or facts that don't confirm what they already believe. Now, here's the thing. That fake news mentality filters into our democracy and ultimately impacts how our government works for all of us. Yes, the media is to blame for all of this, but I'm talking all media: broadcast TV, cable TV, radio, newspapers, social media, all part of the problem. Now, I'm going to tell you something that you might not want to hear, but it's possible that you may also be to blame for some of this. We, as the viewers, the listeners, and the consumers of all this media, have to take some responsibility for what's going on. Now, as a journalist, I can tell you, the reality is democracy and the media go hand in hand. One cannot fully exist without the other. A functioning democracy, a constitutional republic, which is what we have in the United States, needs a functioning and free press to bring things that are hidden in the shadows out into the light, and needs its citizens to be able to say what they want about those things. That's what the First Amendment does for all of us. It gives us all that right. We have the freedom of speech, the freedom of press, the freedom to have a different opinion, and the freedom to criticize our government openly and loudly. And boy, have we been doing that a lot lately. But a lot has changed in our country since the First Amendment was ratified way back in 1791. Long gone are the days when a printing press is the only way for us to share information. Journalists turned to radios, then they turned to television, then they turned to cable, and now everyone uses social media to share information. And at this point, we have so much information, so many opinions, and the ability to pick and choose and spread that information so widely and easily. This is what the Constitution and the Bill of Rights intended: for all of us to be informed. This is how it should be. But there is definitely a downside to all this information. Blame it on money, blame it on lack of education, blame it on human nature, blame it on the media. Take your pick. But there are a lot of incentives for a lot of people to embellish or simply make stuff up for clicks and ratings. Misinformation sells. It's worth a lot of money. It spreads faster than the truth. It gets people more fired up. Now, I see this on a pretty large scale every single day. So for years, I interacted with large television audiences, and now I interact with my more than 3 million followers every single day. I report on the facts and the news that actually impacts your everyday life. So I see misinformation everywhere. I watch it fly around the internet, and I watch really smart people fall for it every single day. And from my perspective, when you boil it down, the problem is actually pretty simple. The collective we forgot to give the critical thinking tools to the people who are consuming all of this media that they need. They cannot decipher what's real and what's not, what's opinion and what's fact. And because of that, we're here with a First Amendment-loving electorate that in a lot of cases doesn't understand the basics or can't sort through the volume of information and misinformation they ingest every day. And in that confused and chaotic state of mind, that same electorate then goes to the polls, which impacts elections and ultimately influences democracy and the way the government works for every single American. So you're probably wondering, what are these critical thinking tools that the audience is missing? How do we get this train back on track? Well, don't look at me. I certainly don't have all the answers. But if you'll indulge me, I'll share with you what I share with others who ask me how to handle misinformation. You've actually already heard me say it. It's what I started with today. You have to have the mindset of opinions aren't facts, feelings aren't facts. Just because it's a fact you don't like doesn't make it fake or wrong. Real journalists aren't your enemy, but misinformation and the people who spread it are. So you really need to start with the facts first. Now, I know that sounds really basic and easy, but when you start to add your bias to the equation and your feelings and what you really want to believe in your heart and soul, some of those things can be really hard to do, because for this to work, you can't just take in some of the facts. You have to take in all of them. Now, I talked about a red flag before. It should be a red flag to you if you find yourself only consuming information that you like or only consuming information that you agree with. That should set off alarm bells in your head. It should be your sign that maybe you want to check out another source for that same information. You might want to check out a few more sources. Now, I get that we're all busy people and we're all juggling a million things all at the same time, and digging around for original source material takes time and effort, and who wants to do that? Besides me, of course. It's just easier for most people to get information from the sources they already like, from the people they already like. I totally get that. That's what makes social media specifically so alluring. It's quick and it's easy. We see a headline or a video from a source that we really want to believe. We form a very strong opinion based on that one piece of information or video. Then, like a game of telephone, we feel the uncontrollable urge to share that very strong opinion with everyone on the internet. And then before you know it, your strong opinion, based on that one piece of information, not the whole story, starts to snowball. And other people watching your content do the exact same thing you are by forming their own strong opinions based on your strong opinions, based on one little piece of information that may or may not be true. You see how that works? And that stuff just adds up in your brain. Whether it's true or not, that's what people take with them into the voting booth. But here's a little something I want you to keep in mind. Next time you come across a video, piece of news, piece of information, I want you to remember the headline is not the story. Now, believe it that or not, that came as a surprise to a lot of people when I told them. They didn't even realize it. So in the newspaper business, it's called a headline. In the TV news business, we call it a lead. On the internet, sometimes people call it clickbait. So a lead, clickbait, a headline is only meant to catch your attention. It is meant to stir up an emotion in you, and that emotion is meant to move you to the action of reading, watching, or listening to the whole story. A headline is not meant for you to form an opinion based on that one little piece of information. Headlines were never intended to give you the whole story, but the whole story is where the facts live. And while we're at it, you want to know what else is not the whole story? A meme you see on the internet, right? You guys know what I'm talking about. A clip or a soundbite with absolutely no context. Anything can be manipulated that way. Now, I'm going to date myself here, but when I was a kid, we obviously had newspapers and radios. I'm not that old. But I vividly remember when it came to television, we only had ABC, NBC, and CBS, and then Fox and the CW came along a little later on in my childhood. And if you were really lucky, you got to have cable. So growing up, broadcast news came on in the morning, in the afternoon, at 6 p.m., and then 11 p.m. at night. Now, news was on TV in my house. In fact, that is where my love of news came from. I wanted to be a reporter from a very young age. But when I was a kid, we only watched the news in my house in the morning, and then maybe we would watch it when my dad came home from work, and then my parents would watch it after I went to bed. And looking back on that time as a journalist now, compared to what we have today, the news on TV back then was finite. It was a 30-minute broadcast. It was an hour-long broadcast. It was a newspaper you read in the morning, and then by lunchtime, it was in the trash. Most people watched, read, or listened to the news sort of in small doses. The latest breaking news wasn't popping up all the time on your watch and on your phone or in your social media feed. None of that was even a thing. And when the news cycle really became a 24-hour-a-day machine, that added so much more news volume and content to the world. And when that happened, all of us in the TV business added a layer of confusion for all of you viewers. We needed to fill those 24 hours a day with something. So I'm going to let you in on a little TV secret here. There's not enough interesting news to fill 24 hours. So instead, we filled it by bringing on commentators and analysts to share their expertise and their perspectives on the news. But we confused you by putting them in the same TV screen as a journalist. And we did not make it abundantly clear that those other people were not journalists. Those other people are there to share their opinions. They are not there to give you neutral information. Sometimes they're there just to be loud and just to stir the pot. Sometimes, most of the time, they do give you some good context to the news. They do give you some insight into what's going on, but in the end, it's still just their opinion. Now, I have been ragging on my profession pretty hard here today, so I want to make sure I get this in as well. The reality is there are amazing, talented, ethics-bound, true journalists who do give you the facts at every single newspaper, radio, TV station, every one of the big cable news outlets. I know, I've worked with them all. There are wonderful people. In its simplest terms, a real journalist is going to give you the who, what, when, where, why, and how of every single story, and it's going to attribute every single thing he or she says or writes, because anything outside of that is speculation and opinion. Real hardworking journalists do exist. We are alive and well, I promise you. But a lot of the times, we get overshadowed by the more flashy, loud, opinionated people that you see on TV or online who drive higher click counts and higher ratings. And that brings me to the space I currently occupy, which is a journalist reporting facts and news about politics on the internet. Brutal, I know. But I love what I do. The internet is the wild, wild west. There are a lot of people who appear very credible with huge online audiences reporting the news and acting as a source for news. Almost none of them are trained journalists. A blogger, an influencer, a random person regurgitating some information that she or he saw or heard. These people are not trained to give you neutral information. And if you're allowing an algorithm to feed you news from these people, that's absolutely fine. But you need to, as my mom would say, put your thinking cap on. When you watch them or listen to them, you need to ask yourself, where are they getting this information? Is it a fact? Or is it their opinion? If they claim to be getting the information from an article, well, what article is it? Is it coming from a reputable source, or is it coming from a bogus misinformation machine? Are you getting both sides of the argument, or are you only just getting one? Even worse, are you being told or influenced to feel a certain way about that information? So the answers to those questions will help you figure out if you're getting neutral information. Now, I get it, that's an extra step, and when you're trying to just, mindlessly scroll on the internet, to go through that thinking cap process is difficult. Why should you, right? These people look credible, but most of the time they're not, and the misinformation they spread gets shared millions of times because most people are just too busy to look for the source or the facts. They believe it, they form their own strong opinions about it, which usually reinforces their existing bias and ultimately informs their voting patterns, which then shapes our government. Now, I'm going to tell you the same thing I tell my followers when they come to me asking for a fact check on some bonkers thing they heard on the internet. The who, what, when, where, why, and how is usually really boring. But misinformation is what I like to call fantastical. It is something that is going to provoke you. It is going to get likes and clicks. It's going to get comments and views and ratings. So if you come across information and it's starting to feel fantastical, just try and go through that thinking cap process, because usually if you pull just one thread, you'll realize at best you're not getting the whole story, and at worst, the whole thing will unravel because it's straight up misinformation. Now, I want to be very clear, I am not dissuading you from watching or sharing information online. You absolutely should do that. That's why we have a First Amendment. And when you come across legacy media, newspaper, radio, broadcast, cable, please don't automatically write them off as fake. Real journalists aren't your enemy. But here's the thing. The misinformation machine is not going to stop turning. The 24-hour-a-day news cycle is not going away. The internet and social media are only going to get bigger. So if there's going to be a change, it is going to fall on you, the viewer, the listener, the consumer. We all have to choose to be smarter about where we get our information, with how we're taking it in, with how we process that information, with how we choose to share that information with the rest of the world. Instead of continuing down this current dark path that is only leading to more misinformed anger at each other all the time, we can choose to do it differently. You are a democracy. Your voice matters. Opinions aren't facts, so find the facts first and use them wisely. Thank you.